when you walk up to these, the scale, this dark black void that's in the sky, it points to some sort of like ominous past, something else going on within these images that isn't readily available. So I'm out there in this dust storm. I have my 6 foot tall camera. It's loaded with paper. And as I peeled the tape off the pinhole opening, I could hear all this sand just getting sucked into the camera, and it was hitting the back wall. And I knew it was scratching my paper. It was really challenging. And I had reached my limit, and I had a full blown meltdown in the middle of the desert. And I was screaming at the wind to just please stop, like for 5 minutes, just stop blowing, so that I could take a clear picture. Because I knew if with all this sand scratching my paper, it was going to leave a mark, and with any kind of movement or like dust flowing like this, that it was going to create this fuzziness or this softness, and I didn't want all of that. So I'm out there screaming like, just stop, just stop, just stop. And I had this aha moment of like, if I wanted a crisp, clear image of these landscapes, then why am I out here in a U-Haul with this huge plywood box? Like that's not the way to get crisp, clear images. And so I started to think about like, in a way, the land is dictating the way that this image is being recorded. There's a lot of chemistry stains on here. Like all of that is part of this process. And all of this belongs to wanting to record these spaces and wanting to record the history and what happened to these spaces. And so that radically shifted how I would ever make a landscape again. I was at home in Los Angeles, and I was thinking about, well, I wonder what like a modern day kind of gold rush, or modern day kind of equivalent to this might be. From doing a lot of reading and research, I landed on reading about Louisiana. And this one article, in fact, was titled Modern Day Gold Rush. And it was talking about the oil and gas industries in Louisiana and the effect that those are having on the economy there, but most notably on the land. This article I was reading talked about how, in a day's time, and this kind of was shocking, and it's kind of hard to visualize, but in one day's time, about 30 football fields worth of land sinks in Louisiana. These oil channels were being dredged through these swamps, and that's a huge contributor to this, what was sinking. And so I went to Louisiana and rented a boat, a little tiny fishing boat. It has like a lawnmower engine that you have to pull on. And I went out into the fog, and within a matter of minutes, I found these oil rigs, and I found these oil channels. So right here, I'm sitting in an old Texaco oil channel. This is one of the oil platforms where barges would come up, and they'd turn on the valves, and all the oil or gas, whatever happens to be at this particular pump, would go onto these barges. So I go back to LA, and it just had me thinking like, how do you photograph contamination? How do I photograph the land sinking, unless it's like through some sort of time lapse, right? Like, how do I point to this larger thing happening without being really didactic? And it started to make me think of like, like ways of seeing photographically that the human eye can't see, right? Like ways of seeing, recording light with the camera that the eye just could never, ever, ever do. And so uh, I went back with this mission in mind, of photographing, um, with my film loaded into the camera in such a way that the only spectrum of light that's recording is the red. So for me, it was just this really kind of obvious way to point to something ominous, to point towards something eerie, something else going on. I made 4 trips to Louisiana, and over those 4 trips, I personally saw areas disappear. And so, I thought I want to focus in on the infrastructure as well as these more natural landscapes. Oh God, this one. This what we're looking at here, is a dredger, and so I mean, this thing just looks evil to me. At least it looked evil, in daylight. It looks evil here in this black and red image, and those big kind of triangles that are in the middle. Those just, I guess, like churn around like that and would like just kind of pull up all of this, earth to be able to shovel it and push it aside. How do you make it obvious that something is contaminated or something's not right? And so I thought, well, I can't really take photos of contaminated water. It, I don't even know if anything would show. Like, how would you know? Right. And so um, I was instead interested in, like, well, what if the contamination itself made the work? And so I also made a series of lumen prints. Lumen prints are very long exposures. By very long, I mean several hours. This is black and white photo paper that you use in the darkroom. When you leave that paper under UV light for long enough, it actually starts to turn color. And that color is based on a chemical reaction between the silver and the paper, the sun, the humidity, the cloud coverage, the temperature. I would anchor the paper underneath any sort of the plant matter that was growing out of these oil platforms. A gentleman that worked on one of those oil platforms, the things that I called looked like a tuning fork. He was just curious about what I was doing, and we struck up a conversation. And so he was talking about the big oil spill in Louisiana in 2005. He said, "Oh, I was here for that." And he was talking about just how much that just kind of wrecked the ecology of the area. And I said, "Oh my God, that must have been so intense." And I said, are you afraid something like that might happen again?" And then he was just like, he started laughing, and he's like, "It's not if it might happen again, it's when it's going to happen again." And he said, we're currently drilling in one right now that's so big, so deep that we don't even talk about it. And like the pressure is so intense. It's just a matter of time before there's a spill. And he said, we call it the Devil's Punchbowl. And I was just like, why isn't anyone talking about this? Like what? And his answer is basically like, you don't bite the hand that feeds you. And then he just started laughing, and he's the one who said, "Wait till you see the Devil's Punchbowl." And I don't, it seemed perfect. All artwork is like wanting to communicate something, and I am wanting to communicate these dark histories that exist and reside in this land.